Kill me! I'm here! Kill me!
Hey everybody, this is Matthew Movies coming at you with my review of, well, nothing actually. This is something a little bit different. This is a rant, and it's unlike my other rants where I've spoken specifically about this scene or this movie or a combination of a couple movies. This time I'm talking about something that I think is running rampant in our movie loving society that I wish would be put into a different perspective, and that is the comparison of current movies to classic movies and how I think a lot of people look at them in a somewhat unfair way. Now, don't get me wrong. If you are in my comment section, you will see that I go to great lengths to respect other people's views. I think the idea that of somebody saying, you know, my thought is on this is this, so I'm right because I know movies better than you do, is one, very egotistical, and two, just plain rude, and I would never want to do that. So if you are somebody who compares classic movies to current movies in a negative way on a regular basis, and you feel very strongly about that, I am not by no means saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying that maybe there's a different perspective to look at it through. So here's the deal. What I think happens a lot is people compare current movies to classic movies, and by that I mean they compare all of the movies that are coming out today to the classic movies. So, you know, if you're looking at a horror movie, for instance, you're going to be looking at like classics like The Shining or Carrie, and you're going to be comparing them to that crappy Blair Witch sequel that just came out, or a X other movie that's not very good. And of course, they're not going to stack up. Or even if you want to be as fair as possible, you're comparing them to some of the best horror movies of the last couple of years, like It Follows or Get Out, and you're comparing those two to them. It still isn't necessarily going to stack up, because you're looking at two of the best horror movies in the history of film versus two of the best recent ones, right? And even if there's, in that case, where it's a lot tighter of a comparison, you're not going to sit there and say, oh, all the current movies are not nearly as good as the old ones. You're going to say, well, the classics are classics for a reason, but these ones here are really good too, right? So if you took maybe your three favorite films from the 2010s so far, and you compare them to your three favorite films from any other decade, chances are they're going to stack up way, way better. And they may not succeed, they may not triumph, they may not reign supreme, but they're still going to be up for comparison in a lot more of a level playing field. Because I feel like people they say, you know, people always talk about all the terrible sequels, all the terrible remakes. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of them, and it's very, very clear that the studios see having a sequel as basically a machine to print money, because people will recognize the brand and just go see it for the brand, and that sucks. And that hasn't necessarily been the case in previous years. But at the same time, there's always been terrible sequels. Who has ever sat there and said, you know, generally speaking, I think sequels are way better than the originals? And you can say that about like a movie like Ghostbusters 2, not nearly as good as Ghostbusters 1. That came out decades ago. It's not a current problem. It's a problem that we're seeing more these days, but it's still not a current thing. It's something that's happened throughout film. And people are always saying, you know, there's no original ideas, there's no original of that. There is, you just have to look for it. Like Get Out, I thought was an extremely original film, but also played within the basis of the horror genre, so that there's touchstones that any horror fans could grab onto, but it was a different story, and it was told in a different way. Because, I mean, let's be honest, there's only X amount of stories in the world, so you can't reinvent the wheel, but you can put a different prism on it. Just like if you compare the movies from the 70s to the movies of the 30s even, like, you're gonna find that a lot of the stories are the same. They're just told in new and interesting ways. And I think that absolutely happens now. Yes, there are cookie cutter movies coming out a lot these days, and that's because I think that I lament the fact that the mid-range budget movie seems to have largely disappeared. You have these blockbusters that are worth like 200 million, 300 million, what have you, getting to outrageous numbers. Like, I've heard that apparently the two Infinity War movies, or the next two Avengers movies, might be hitting $1 billion in budget between the two of them, which is mental. But at the same time, you have all these little low budget movies, and you don't really have the movies in between. And I miss that. I wish that they were still there. But to sit there and try to say that there was nothing creative coming out, I think you either A, you need to be looking more, not just be looking at the major releases that come out each week, or B, you just gotta look through less green, like the grass is not always going to be greener in the past, right? And you got to remember too that there's a lot of nostalgia wrapped up. Like, there are movies that I talk about on here that I will admit quite freely that it's impossible that I like them so much because of, you know, memories of watching them when I was younger, and they're like touchstones of my childhood. And so when you wrap all that in there, where you know, you're looking at the nostalgia, you're looking at these are the cream of the crop of the history of film, and then you're comparing them to a movie that comes out on any given week, or a slew of movies that come out any single week. That's not a fair comparison. You gotta try to look at it in a more balanced manner. Are there movies that have come out this year that you really enjoyed? Are there movies that came out this decade that you really enjoyed? Chances are it's probably it's just gonna be the same amount of movies almost as were in the past. You may have to look a little bit harder, you may have to care a little bit more, but there are great movies coming out all the time. And in my personal opinion, when people say stuff like there's no great movies coming out, or movies were so much better back in the day, I don't think that's true. Now, I will say this, there's one caveat to this. There was definitely a period in the earlier 2000s where I think a lot of movies were ruined by an over-reliance on inferior CG. Because if you go back and you look at, like, Die Another Day, for instance, that wave scene is just so mind-bogglingly terrible. But you're starting to get, things are starting to boomerang a little bit, where the filmmakers are starting to embrace the practical, and finally getting to the point where they understand that you can use CG as a tool, but it's not a replacement for everything that came before. And to me, that's huge for the film industry. So those are my thoughts on comparing classic movies to current movies. And let me know in the comments what you think. If you agree with me, if you think I'm completely off base, if you're like, darn tootin', all the old movies are the good movies, whatever, hit me up. Please hit that like button, hit that share button. It makes it much more likely that people will check out this video. And it's not like people are going to be searching a lot for comparing classic films to new ones. So I could use all the help I can get on this video specifically. And please hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. It'll let you know if you're new here to come and check out when I put out a new video. And I love having that conversation, that back and forth. That's what inspired me to make this video, is because of comments that I've had where I, you know, tried to make that the statement like this in the comment section. I just thought it would be cool to put out a video with my basic ideas. So I love having the conversation, so I'd love it if you could join it. So please do that. Other than that, have yourself a nice day.